When a moment arrives that forces a nation to rethink its assumptions, it does not always come from a battlefield or an economic crisis. Sometimes it comes from a single voice, measured, steady, and unshaken, speaking a truth so clear that even the most powerful countries must stop and listen. And in the days leading up to this moment, the world watched as India's External Affairs Minister stepped onto the global stage once again. Not with bravado, not with theatrics, but with a conviction that sent tremors through Washington. It was a message bold enough to catch America off guard, strong enough to stun audiences across continents, and unexpected enough to leave even Donald Trump momentarily silent. For years, the international system had operated on a set of assumptions that certain nations would lead and others would follow, that decisions made in Western capitals would ripple outward and shape the choices of the rest of the world, and that rising powers must carve out their space carefully, cautiously, and often quietly. But the India that stands tall today is no longer cautious, no longer quiet, and certainly no longer willing to fit into the molds designed decades ago. And the voice articulating this new India has become one of the most respected, one of the most articulate, and one of the most unflinching voices in global diplomacy. So when he spoke firm, clear, and unmistakably confident, America paused, not because his words were confrontational, but because they were honest, not because he challenged another nation, but because he challenged an outdated mindset. And for a brief moment, even Trump, a man who thrives on bold declarations and sharp rhetoric, found himself without an immediate answer. The message was simple. India will not be pressured. India will not be lectured. And India will not compromise its strategic independence. Not for applause, not for approval, and certainly not for temporary political convenience. That clarity is rare in a world where nations often bend, stretch, and twist their positions to fit expectations. But that clarity is exactly what has defined India's foreign policy evolution over the past decade. And it is why this moment resonated so widely. He reminded the world that India is not just a participant in global affairs, it is a shaping force. A nation that once had to justify its decisions now simply states them. A country that once sought acceptance now commands respect. And when he spoke not as a diplomat seeking favor, but as a representative of a nation that has learned through history, hardship, and perseverance that its voice matters and will be heard. He laid out the principle that nations big or small must make choices that reflect their own realities, not someone else's expectations. And in doing so, he held up a mirror to the global system, asking whether the world was ready to accept a truly multipolar future, not just in theory, but in practice. Because a multipolar world is not defined by speeches or declarations. It is defined by nations that are willing to stand firm, even when pressured. His words suggested that power is no longer measured only by military might or economic size, but by the ability to think independently, to act deliberately, and to speak truth without fear. And this is what caught America by surprise. Not a challenge, not a provocation, but the calm certainty of a nation that no longer questions its place. When he addressed concerns about alliances, partnerships, and international expectations, he did so with an ease that conveyed deep confidence. India will cooperate with America, he affirmed, but not as a subordinate. India will partner, but only as an equal. India will engage, but without surrendering its values or its strategic autonomy. And in this subtle yet powerful framing, he shifted the dynamic entirely. It was no longer about whether India fits into America's vision of the world. It was about whether America is ready to accept India's. Trump, known for his strong personality and unapologetic style, had built much of his political identity around the idea of American dominance. But here was India, represented by a diplomat who did not raise his voice, did not seek confrontation, yet conveyed a message that fundamentally challenged that worldview. And in that moment, Trump recognized something many had been slow to accept. India is not a rising power anymore, it is a risen power. The reaction across Washington was immediate. Analysts scrambled to interpret the implications. Commentators marveled at the directness. Policymakers found themselves rethinking strategies that had gone unquestioned for years. And beneath all of that, there was the unmistakable sense that a shift had occurred not in words, but in reality. He went on to describe India's vision of global order, one rooted not in dominance, but in respect, not in coercion but in cooperation, not in unilateralism but in partnership. He reminded the world that sovereignty is not negotiable, that national interest is not something to apologize for, and that dignity is not something to compromise. These are values that India has carried for decades, but for the first time they were being articulated from a position of undeniable strength. He spoke about the changing expectations of the global South, about nations long marginalized in global decision-making now demanding a seat at the table, and he made it clear that India would be a voice for these nations, not as a spokesperson, but as a partner that understands their aspirations because it once shared them. This struck a chord not just in Asia or Africa, but across the developing world. India was not speaking from theory, it was speaking from experience. He emphasized that narratives that once shaped global opinion are losing their power. Countries are no longer accepting stories crafted in foreign capitals. They are writing their own. And India's story, the story of democratic resilience, economic progress, technological innovation, and cultural confidence, is resonating everywhere. He reminded America that partnership cannot be based on fear, suspicion, or dominance. True partnership is built on trust. True partnership is built on recognizing that interests may differ, but respect must remain constant. And perhaps most importantly, he made it clear that India will never compromise its independence for the sake of alignment. India will cooperate when cooperation serves its people. It will stand alone when standing alone is the right choice. What stunned America was not defiance, it was independence. It was the realization that India's foreign policy has matured into something uniquely its own. No longer modeled after any other nation, no longer shaped by pressure, no longer hesitant. And when he communicated this, he did so with a calm confidence that signaled the world has entered a new era. He highlighted India's role in global stability, pointing to its contributions in peacekeeping, humanitarian aid, disaster response, and regional security. This was not a boast. It was a reminder that leadership is earned through action. India's actions speak for themselves in the Indian Ocean, in global supply chains, in technology partnerships, in renewable energy, and in democratic governance. He addressed America directly, though not confrontationally. He acknowledged the importance of the partnership, the shared values, the shared interests, and the shared global responsibilities, but he also made it clear that the relationship must evolve not into nay of dependence or dominance, into one of mutual respect, mutual trust, and mutual benefit. This recalibration is not just India's expectation, it is India's requirement. As he spoke, it became clear why America was stunned, because India was not asking for respect. India was asserting it. India was not requesting space on the global stage, it was taking it. India was not waiting for approval, it was defining its future on its own terms. He reminded listeners that strength is not measured by how loudly a nation speaks, but by how firmly it stands. And India, he said, will stand firm whether the world applauds or critiques, whether global powers support or resist, whether expectations align or diverge. Because great nations do not drift with the winds of global politics. Great nations shape them. The message was not directed solely at Trump, though he was the one visibly caught off guard. It was directed at the world, at policymakers who still believe India can be swayed easily, at commentators who underestimate India's strategic depth, at institutions that have not updated their assumptions, and at nations that still think influence can be imposed rather than earned. What he delivered was not merely a diplomatic statement, it was a declaration of identity, a proclamation of independence, a reflection of confidence, a signal to the world that the era of unquestioned global hierarchies is fading, and the era of sovereign, self-assured nations is rising. And in the days that followed, something remarkable happened. The shock in Washington turned into recognition, the surprise turned into respect, the hesitation turned into re-evaluation. America began to understand that India's rise is not a challenge. It is an inevitability, not a threat. It is an opportunity, not a disruption, but a rebalancing long overdue. As his speech concluded, the world saw something unmistakable. India was not speaking as a follower, not as a junior partner, not as a nation seeking validation. India was speaking as a nation that knows its power, understands its purpose, and stands tall with the confidence of a civilization that has endured for thousands of years. And when he walked off that stage, the silence in the room told the story. The world was listening, America was listening, even Trump was listening, because in that moment, everyone understood India is no longer reacting to global events. India is shaping them. India's rise reflects thoughtful planning, not sudden ambition. And this distinction is critical to understanding the nation's evolving role on the global stage. For decades, India has pursued a trajectory that balances ambition with strategy, patience with decisiveness, and growth with stability. Unlike sudden shifts of power that may capture attention in the short term, India's progress has been deliberate, layered, and deeply rooted in both historical experience and contemporary realities. Every major policy decision, whether economic reform, defense modernization, technological investment, or diplomatic engagement, reflects an underlying coherence. A roadmap designed to secure long-term advantages rather than fleeting headlines. This thoughtful planning is visible in India's economic strategies. India did not rush into policies for immediate gains. It cultivated sectors like information technology, pharmaceuticals, and renewable energy over decades, carefully nurturing talent, building infrastructure, and creating regulatory frameworks that could support sustainable growth. Even when opportunities for quick expansion presented themselves, India's leadership often opted for measured steps that ensured stability and resilience. This disciplined approach has allowed India to weather global crises, adjust to market shifts, and emerge stronger, all while quietly expanding its influence across multiple sectors. The same strategic patience is evident in India's foreign policy. India has consistently prioritized long-term relationships and regional stability over transactional engagements. Diplomatic initiatives are guided by foresight rather than reaction, with each move carefully calibrated to enhance national security, economic prosperity, and geopolitical relevance. Whether negotiating trade agreements, participating in multilateral forums, or engaging in defense collaborations, India's actions are rarely impulsive. They are part of a broader vision to position the country as a responsible, reliable, and influential global actor. By planning meticulously, India ensures that its rise is sustainable and respected rather than disruptive or erratic. Defense modernization and technological innovation also reflect India's careful planning. Investments in indigenous programs, from fighter jets to space technology, are executed with an eye on self-reliance and future capability. India does not merely adopt external solutions, it develops domestic capacity, ensuring long-term control over strategic assets. This approach demonstrates that India's ambition is not reckless, but guided by an understanding of risk, resource allocation, and the global balance of power. By emphasizing planning over spontaneity, India secures not only immediate capability, but also a durable foundation for decades to come. Moreover, this careful trajectory is underpinned by social and institutional development. India's leadership recognizes that true national strength comes not only from external achievements, but from internal cohesion, inclusive growth, and societal resilience. Policies aimed at education, skill development, and digital infrastructure reflect a vision that extends far beyond short-term political wins. Each initiative is connected to the broader objective of establishing India as a country capable of sustained influence and leadership on the world stage. Ultimately, India's rise is the result of calculated, informed, and consistent efforts. It is not a sudden surge born out of ambition alone, but a carefully charted path that integrates history, resources, culture, and foresight. This methodical approach distinguishes India from nations whose power emerges in bursts and fades quickly. Through thoughtful planning, India ensures that every step taken consolidates its position, strengthens its capacities, and prepares the country to navigate the complexities of a dynamic global environment. By emphasizing planning over impulsive ambition, India signals to the world that its ascent is both intentional and enduring, and that its influence will be measured, respected, and lasting.